Hello everyone, how's it going? In this video, we're going to try to understand Intel Corporation and whether or not this company is something we should be looking from an investment perspective. There are some interesting points that we're going to cover in this video. Let's get started. It's sitting at about $50.53, but this is not the number we should be looking into. The company is defined by its market cap, and it's sitting at about $206 billion, which means if you had about $266 billion, you could go and buy Intel Corporation right now. And say if you had, and if you have worked very hard and you've taken some years out of your life and you have saved $206 billion, whether this company is something you should be buying. So let's come down and see what the revenue and income looks like. The revenue is $77 billion annually, approximately, growing at about 8%. The growth is not as fast as the other growth stocks that you might come across. The net income is about $20 to $21 billion, and it's been consistent over the past few years. It's been growing, the revenues are growing, the net income is growing. The good thing is, with the $21 billion, and if there was no growth, you would get your money back in just 10 years. So if you had about $206 billion and if you invested in 10 years, Intel will give you money back, and then the next is just nothing but desert for you. Now, let's look into some of the interesting aspects that are going across this company. This is Dataroma, and it's showing the insider trading chart. Well, there are many super investors that are invested in this company, which you can also find on this website. But more importantly, I felt this chart, which shows the amount of purchase and sales going by the insiders. Now, insiders are people who know the company much better than you and I as investors do. And look into this thing. Patrick Gelsinger, he's the current CEO and the main person who's running the company right now, and he bought shares very recently, back in October. And there are other people, the directors and the other group, the board of directors are also buying this company, but the CEO buying is something to look into. Monish Babrai said that people sell for a variety of reasons. They might have anything to do with, and they could sell for many reasons. But when they buy only and only for one reason, and that's when they believe that the price of the share is undervalued or there's something big coming up. So now let's look at the shares that are outstanding. For the past few years, Intel has been buying back their shares. So Intel fees, it's a dividend stock, it pays out dividend as well. But in addition to that, it's also buying its own shares. And Intel basically feels that buying its own shares is a better investment than anything. So that's a good statement, and that shows that your portfolio or your revenue aspect that you're buying from this company is increasing. Your share is increasing because the company is reducing the amount of shares that are available in the market. So they're concentrating your portfolio very nicely. The total assets and liabilities ratio is very good. You're looking at assets about this much and you have the liabilities this much. So it's easily, very comfortable. It can take care of its liabilities if it wanted to. The next is the insider holdings. The insider holding for this company is only 0.08%. This is something which I would prefer, which I personally like to see a better number, just because if the insiders hold a majority of the percentage, then you know that they have their skin in the game as much as you do. So they value the stock price as much as we do. Next, look into this particular aspect. Patrick Gelsinger, he has about 200,000 shares. He's the chief executive officer, but he is not the founder of the company. Patrick Gelsinger is currently running the company, and he was appointed as the CEO back in February of 2021. Basically, they had a lot of pressure from other investors that came into the company, and they wanted to change in management. They wanted to fully reform the company, and Patrick Gelsinger was brought in, and he became the CEO in February 2021. But the interesting aspect is Patrick is not new to Intel. Patrick started working at Intel back when he was 18 years old. So he started working with Intel right in the quality technician department on the production line of Intel, and slowly became an engineer, then had a master's degree from Stanford. He became this vice president, and he rose up the ranks of Intel. In between, he went out and looked into other companies. He ran other companies. He became CEO of other companies like VMware. And he has a very good track record in the Silicon Valley. He's a person who was brought up in a rural Amish community and lived on a farm. And people who live on a farm, they know how to run animals. They basically know how to operate a farm and work with animals, lead animals. That's the best aspect about a leader. When you know how to, train and work with animals, be patient with them, direct them to the right place. These are the very few qualities of a leader. Now, this is you would find it very strange coming out from a farm, but those are some good aspects to lead or to train a future leader. So that's the background of Patrick. But again, he's not the founder, he's the agent, he's just running the company. The founder, on the other hand, Gordon Moore, he's still around, and he was born in 1929. He founded, along with another gentleman, Robert Noyce, Intel. And Gordon Moore is famous for the Moore's Law. And if you don't know what Moore's Law is, basically, he coined the term where the number of transistors available on the chip of Intel, the integrated circuit, the chip, that should double every 2 years. It was something that he propounded on his company, and he told all his engineers that every 2 years, no matter what, you have to double the amount of transistors that you're putting up on an Intel chip. And this law, it was just basically a company motto, and they wanted their engineers to work on this phenomena as much as possible. And they kept on doing it. Every 2 years, they doubled the transistors. And this fueled the growth that you're seeing in the Silicon Valley, the amount of development that happened, the amount of technology that happened, the smartphones that came out. This is all because of this particular phenomena, where Gordon Moore was sticking to it, and he basically made his engineers double the transistors on the Intel circuit. And basically, the people found this so interesting that they started to adopt this phenomena into their own companies. They would come back to the companies and say, hey, you have to increase your output every 2 years, which means about 41% annual growth. And so you're doubling every 2 years. Next is the Intel Alder Lake processor. Intel has basically recently developed the Alder Lake processor, and it worked very closely with Microsoft for Windows 11. Alder Lake is a hybrid processor, which means there are two types of processors in that same processor chip. One for higher end tasks and one for lower end tasks. And Microsoft worked very closely for designing the Windows 11 so that Windows 11 could use those two processors. So wherever you had a very high task which required more energy, more efficiency, you would go to the higher performing processor. And it was lower tasks, then it would go to the lower tasks. So that's where the Microsoft and Intel worked together, and they launched it earlier this year. This is a video from Linus Tech, and he goes over many nice. It's a good channel, and he explains many types of different tech tips. And in this, he compared the AMD processors with Intel very nicely, and you can see the Intel processor performing in many cases better than AMD. And these are the biggest competitors of Intel right now. The TSMC, which is based in Taiwan, and they hold a large competition for them. And Intel has its own competitors in-house as well, in domestic, in the United States as well. You have the AMD, you have NVIDIA, you have Samsung, and all these other companies which are heavy competition for Intel. And AMD, look into this. This is a company which is just $168 billion, sitting at a P ratio of 45. And this company gives competition to the likes of NVIDIA and Intel. So something interesting to look into. Just wanted to share with you. With that, take care, stay safe, bye-bye.